What's up, everyone? Welcome to a journey through the darkest corners of history, where death has taken on bizarre and unexpected forms. From tragic accidents to bizarre circumstances, I present you some of the most unusual deaths in all of history. So, we're just going to jump right on into it. First up is Stanton Walker. Stanton Walker died on October 25th, 1902. Stanton was a spectator at a baseball game in Morristown, Ohio, just behind the Walkers' home. And as he was sitting on a pile of fence rails between two young companions, basically he had two friends with him, and they were just sitting there watching this baseball game. The young man on the left was keeping the score of the game, and during the game had asked the young man on the right of Stanton for his pocket knife, basically so he could sharpen his pencil, so he could keep on track of the game. The friend on the right started to pass the open knife across the friends, but just as his hand was in front of Stanton, with the point of the knife pointing towards him, basically, you can kind of see where this is going. A foul ball had ended up getting hit towards their direction, and it ended up striking the hand of the friend and the knife, basically. So as this kid is passing across Stanton, he's basically got the knife kind of like an idiot. He's got it like pointed like this, you know what I mean, with the blade. And as he's pointing it across, the foul ball hit it, and it basically drove the blade into his chest, and the blade passed between two ribs, severing the artery below his heart. His friends were asking him if he was hurt or not, and basically freaking out, obviously, because these are not old kids. We'll get to that in a second. He was pretty young. But basically, Stanton was kind of saying, no, I'm fine. Yeah, it didn't hurt that much. But the wound soon began to bleed very heavily, and he died within minutes. Unfortunately, Stanton was only 9 years old, so these were some young kids dealing with this, all just trying to watch a baseball game, and it ended up turning into probably one of the worst days of their lives at the end of the day. George Spencer Millet worked in the New York Metropolitan Department of Applications in New York's Madison Square. Though he had only been there for a few months, Millet had already made an impression on a ton of his coworkers, especially the ladies. Apparently, his manners were good, and his hair and fair complexion made him a favorite of all the girls' stenographers. On February 15th, 1909, which was Millet's 15th birthday, these girl stenographers promised that when the workday ended, they would kiss him once for every year of his age. I think that's each of them too, so even at 15 years old, bro, like, I don't know, we're not gonna get into all that because that is just weird in itself. Like, I don't know how old these office ladies are, but bro, this kid is like turning 15, dog. Like, I don't know. Y'all can make your own decision about that. That's a little weird to me. At 4:30 p.m., they made good on their vow and descended on Millet to deliver the expected smooches, kisses, whatever you want to call them. Millet actually tried to wiggle away, and in the scuffle, Millet ended up yelling, "I'm stabbed." 23-year-old Gertrude Robbins, one of the kiss-happy stenographers, rushed to his aid, but fainted at the sight of blood streaming from a wound in his chest. So apparently, during the scuffle, something ended up happening to my guy, George. An ambulance was summoned and Millet was transported to New York Hospital, but sadly, he died from his injuries on the way over there. Now, this is tragic. Obviously, it was his birthday. He kind of just got assaulted by a bunch of these women. I don't know how old these women are, but to me, this is just weird in general. But anyways, arrested on the charge of homicide, Robbins ended up telling police what actually had happened. And right before the office kiss fest, Millet had been holding an ink eraser, which isn't a rubber blob, but it's actually a 6-inch long metal tool that resembles a knife. When the stenographers ended up surrounding him, Millet's eraser was in his pocket, and during the scuffle, he ended up falling forward and the sharp point of the eraser drove straight into his heart. This is fucked up. Like, I don't even know. I don't even want to censor it. Like, that is just fucked up, bro. Like, it's this kid's birthday. Like I said, like, he's turning 15 today. You know what I mean? He's at work on his birthday. And then he's getting, like, attacked. I mean, don't get me wrong. Hey, listen, you got every girl at your office loving you. That's dope. But not to the point where, like, dude, these women are, like, chasing you down, attacking you for kisses. You know what I mean? Like, that's a little weird to me, at least. But I don't know. When it became clear that Millet's death was actually a terrible accident, the charge against Robbins was dropped, which, fair enough. To be honest, I don't think she meant for any of this to happen. Obviously, I don't think any of them, so I think it would be weird if they just charged the one when there was a group of at least like 5 or 6 girls surrounding him doing this, so I don't think that would have been fair anyways. Millet was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, and his gravestone actually reads, "Lost life by stab and falling on ink eraser, evading 6 young women trying to give him birthday kisses in office in Metropolitan Life Building." Which, I mean, that's a mouthful, first off, for being on the grave, but that's kind of dope. At least, I mean, hey, you had all the girls chasing after you, bro. Like, you went out how a lot of guys wish they could at the end of the day. But Sadly, he lost his life way too young, bro. And plus, this whole situation is still like really weird. I wish I knew the age of these women because, like, I don't know. To me, this is like kind of like assault, bro. Like, you feel me? This kid's like only 15 years old. First off, he's working at an office building. I never met a 15-year-old working in an office building. Maybe that's just because of where I'm from, but anyways. RIP to George. That is pretty messed up to lose your life on your birthday, especially the way he did it. You know what I mean? He was at work. He was about to go home, probably enjoy himself, and now he can't. So RIP to George, but going on to the next one. Grigori Rasputin was murdered during the early morning on the 30th of December in 1916 at the home of his friend Felix Yusov. He died of 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was a close-range shot to his forehead. Now, little is certain about his death beyond this, and the circumstances of his death have been the subject of considerable speculation. Basically, there's no exact cause, well, there's a cause of death, but there's no exact straight definition of what happened that night. There's no exact story that is definitively proven to be true. It's kind of all, this guy says this story, so we'll get into it. According to historian Douglas Smith, what happened at the Yusupov home in December will never truly be known. The story that Yusupov recounted in his memoirs, however, has become the most frequently told versions of the event, and the circumstances of his death have been the subject of considerable speculation ever since. Yusupov says that he invited Rasputin to his home shortly after midnight and ushered him into the basement. Basically, they were already friends before this, they had known each other, so this was nothing really out of the ordinary. Yusupov offered Rasputin tea and cakes which had both been laced with cyanide. Rasputin initially refused the cakes, but then had begun to eat them and, to Yusupov's surprise, appeared unaffected by the poison. Basically, he was fine. Rasputin then asked for some Mandaria wine, which had also been poisoned at the time, and drank 3 whole glasses and still showed no sign of being poisoned or any type of duress at all. Basically, he was chilling, okay? At this point, he's eating cakes, drank tea, and drank 3 glasses of wine, all laced with cyanide, which Yusupov was obviously trying to murder his friend for whatever reason. At around 2:30 a.m., Yusupov excused himself to go upstairs where his fellow conspirators were waiting. Basically, he had his boys in the crib upstairs waiting just for Rasputin to die from this poison, which he thought was going to happen. He ended up taking a revolver from Dmitry Pavlovich, then returned to the basement and told Rasputin that he better look at the crucifix and say a prayer, referring to a crucifix that was in the room, and then shot him 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was a close-range shot to his forehead. The conspirators then drove to Rasputin's apartment, with Sukutin wearing Rasputin's coat and hat in an attempt to make it look as though Rasputin had returned home that night. They were kind of covering their tracks, giving themselves an alibi, making it look like Rasputin had ended up making it home. Upon return to Moika Palace, Yusupov went back to the basement to ensure that Rasputin was dead. Suddenly, Rasputin leaped up and attacked Yusupov, who freed himself with some effort and fled upstairs. Basically, at this point, Rasputin is a complete savage, dude. He has drank so much poison this night, okay? He's gotten shot in the chest, and now he's jumping up and attacking the guy that tried to kill him. Like, he is, bro, he is the John Wick of his little era right there. He was living in his own movie at that point, okay?
Oh, he has to die.
Rasputin then followed Yusupov into the palace's courtyard, where he was shot by
Purishkovich.
He collapsed into a snowbank. The conspirators then wrapped his body in cloth and drove it to the
Petrovsky Bridge.
Then they dropped it into the
Malaya Nevka River.
Basically, the weirdest part about his death is that when his body was finally recovered a few weeks later or a few days later, basically when they pulled him out and they did the autopsy, they figured out that he did not actually die from the gunshot wounds. He died from having water filled in his lungs, which is no surprise to anybody. He was tied up, wrapped up, thrown off a bridge into a river. But it's weird that that is actually the final thing that caused his death, according to whoever did the autopsy. The gunshots didn't do it. The poisoning didn't do it. It was being wrapped up and basically drowning to death after he was beaten all this terrible time, dude. Guy had a horrible night, but was a savage. He took 3 gunshot wounds, and technically those did not kill him. The drowning killed him. But anyways, moving on to the next time. Up next is the story of John A. Byrnes, Richard Leroy McKinley, and Richard C. Legg. On Tuesday, January 3rd, 1961, during the testing of an experimental nuclear reactor design in Arco, Idaho, 2 soldiers and a sailor were unfortunately killed, but their deaths were not due to radiation poisoning or anything weird like that. While trying to bring the reactor online, Army Specialist John A. Byrnes was supposed to pull a control rod part way out by hand, but he pulled the rod further than he intended to, okay? The reactor instantly went critical, which flash boiled the water around the reactor, and the force of the steam expanding lifted the entire reactor into the air about 2.7 meters, or almost about 9 feet 1 inches. Now, many of the components were thrown out of the top, one of which impaled Navy electrician Richard C. Legg, lifted him from the catwalk and penetrated the ceiling, leaving him dangling. While the reactor was airborne, the radioactive steam was escaping and basically started spraying the room everywhere. The steam was so hot that Byrnes instantly died from severe burns. Army Specialist Richard Leroy McKinley suffered a head wound from which he died later on that day. Basically, this whole situation just messed up these 3 people completely, okay? The steam left the bodies of all 3 men radioactive, so they were buried in lead coffins. They couldn't even be buried normally or cremated because of how much radioactive material basically was in their bodies at this point because of all the steam. Officials actually feared that moving them would risk spreading contamination along public roadways, so a graveyard was established in the desert only 0.5 kilometers or about 0.3 miles from the explosion. So they didn't really even move these people too far from where the explosion initially happened. Not even a full mile, not even a full kilometer. 0.3 miles, that's not long at all. That's not too far away. The graveyard is actually still monitored by the EPA to this day. That's the Environmental Protection Agency for anybody that didn't know. And the 3 remain the only human beings killed by a reactor explosion in the United States in all of history. Richard Leroy McKinley was 27 years old, John Byrnes was 22 years old, and Richard Legg was 26 years old at the times of their deaths. RIP to them 3, man. They definitely weren't expecting all that. Like, you're working a regular day, you're doing what you're told to do, and you ended up just pulling this one piece of this reactor a little bit further than was what was supposed to happen, basically, you know what I mean? And it just completely ended all 3 of their lives at the end of the day. Each one kind of set off another reaction that just ended all of them. So RIP to those 3, man. They definitely weren't expecting it. Not, you know what I mean? They were still young, bro. 26, 22, 27. You know what I mean? I'm 25, so hey, RIP to them, man. That's crazy. Echol Cole and Robert Walker. Cole, age 36, and Walker, age 30, were both sanitation workers in the city of Memphis, Tennessee. Both reported for work on February 1st, 1968, a day the rain would later be reported as torrential, overflowing the sewers and flooding the streets. So, terrible rainy day, flooding everywhere. You can imagine how it is. While on shift at around 4:20 p.m., the pair sought refuge in the back of their truck during a rainstorm. And sanitation workers, for anybody that's not sure, it's basically like a trash truck driver, you know what I mean? It's a trash man, and honestly probably do one of the best jobs, the jobs that I'm most grateful for. Please, like, I hate having trash in my house, so I love them at the end of the day. Now, while they're taking refuge in the back of the truck while it's pouring out and everything, a malfunction actually happened and both men were crushed to death by the truck's garbage compactor. I'm not sure how countries outside of the US or whatever have their trash trucks, trash compactors, whatever, but usually there's like a part in the back where it's open, you throw your trash in, and then the top kind of comes down, flattens it all into the bag, you know what I mean, compacts it all, literally the garbage compactor. Anyways, that's kind of what happened. They got compacted into it. I'm not sure who did that, but anyways, apparently nobody actually touched these buttons, nobody did anything malicious to them. It's just some type of malfunction, you know what I mean, and caused their deaths. Now, following their deaths, their widows actually received no insurance benefits, and the city only offered 1 month's pay for each man and $500 for funeral expenses. I'm not sure how many of you guys have ever lost people, had to go through the funeral process or whatever, but $500 is not doing you anything, like nothing. Cremation is like $5,000 up near me. That is bread. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I don't even got enough money to die. You know what I mean? Like, that is messed up. Realistically, they are working for the city. They're trash men, they're garbage men, whatever you want to call them. They should definitely have some type of insurance policy, especially you're a government worker at that point. So I don't know where all this is heading, but this is crazy to me, to be real. Black Memphians donated $100,000 to the widows. The United Auto Workers donated an additional $25,000. The deaths of Cole and Walker proved to be a catalyst for the Memphis sanitation strike, and on February 11th, 10 days after their deaths, Union Local 1733 held a strike meeting where over 400 workers complained that the city refused to provide decent wages and working conditions. The workers wanted immediate action, but the city refused. On Monday, February 12, 1968, 930 out of 1,100 sanitation workers did not show up for work, including 214 of 230 sewer drainage workers. Only 38 out of 108 garbage trucks continued to move on with the week, basically. Their deaths, together with many racial and working class injustices, prompted Martin Luther King Jr. himself to join a citywide march on March 18th. The march ended with police action, but another was scheduled. Tragically, King was actually assassinated the evening before the second march, and this is basically the march that he showed up for, was the march for Echol and Coles, basically, if that makes sense. Where Martin Luther King was assassinated, where he got tragically murdered, was at this march, was the evening. He was there for this event, so that's why I added this one. Honestly, just crazy how things, turn out. RIP to everybody that I mentioned. Definitely some of them were worse than others. At the end of the day, I would not want to be crushed to death by a trash truck while I'm trying to just stay not wet, get out of the pouring rain. But man, RIP to them. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's any more people that you want me to talk about. I have a few more. I'm not gonna get into anything that's like too messed up or anything like that. I do want to be like somewhat type of respectful, but some of these are just unexpected, weird, crazy, so I do want to go over them. Anyways, if you haven't watched the first part of this, I'll make sure that I link that below. I'll put up a little card thing right here. That one is a little long, so these ones I'm trying to focus more on a couple more people, maybe 5-6 people per video, break it down a little bit more, talk a little bit more about them. But let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff that they love, share it with a friend. Other than that, stay safe, stay dangerous, get laid. I'll catch you soon. See ya.